Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivanodari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivanodari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivanodari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivanodari Yasodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivanodari Janna Vallabha Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivanodari Sodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Jamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Vishnupada Paramahamsa Prabhupada also tells us Shishimad. His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki. Ananta Gota Vaishnava ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Prem Sigaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar. Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Maya Punavi Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Swami Veda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai, Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai, Hoyam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Go Premanandi, all glorious some devotees, all glorious some devotees. All glorious some devotees. All glorious to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, text number 54, which has very long prose. So I'm just going to chant the word for word. You what? Just read the English. All right. My dear king, woman, who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end, they're very disturbing. It's exactly like the flower, which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With woman, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires and he enjoys sex, just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys a life of sense gratification from his tongue to his genitals. And in this way, the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like the sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death, who is trying to kill him from behind. Just try to understand this. You are in a very precarious position and are threatened from all sides. Purport. Materialistic life means forgetting one's constitutional position as the eternal servant of Krishna. And this forgetfulness is especially enhanced in the Grihastha ashram. In the Grihastha ashram, a young man accepts a young wife who is very beautiful in the beginning, but in due course of time, after giving birth to many children and becoming older and older, she demands many things from the husband to maintain the entire family. At such a time, the wife becomes detestable to the very man who accepted her in his younger days. In her younger days. One becomes attached to the Grihastha ashram for two reasons only. The wife cooks palatable dishes for the satisfaction of her husband's tongue, and she gives him sexual pleasure at night. A person attached to the Grihastha ashram is always thinking of these two things, palatable food and sex enjoyment. The talks of the wife, which are enjoyed as a family recreation, and the talks of the children, both attract the living entity. He thus forgets that he has to die someday and has to prepare for the next life if he wants to be put into a congenial body. The deer in the flower garden is an allegory used by the great sage Narada to point out to the king that the king himself is similarly entrapped by such surroundings. Actually, everyone is surrounded by such a family life which misleads one. The living entity thus forgets that he has to return home, back to Godhead. He simply becomes entangled in family life. Prahlad Maharaj has therefore hinted, Hitvam patam grim andakupam varangato yadharm ashrayeta. Family life is considered a blind well, andakupam, in which a person falls and dies without help. Prahlad Maharaj recommends that while one's senses are there and one is strong enough, he should abandon the Grihastha ashram and take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, going to the forest of Vrindavan. According to Vedic civilization, one has to give up family life at a certain age, the age of 50, take vanaprast, and eventually remain alone as a sannyasi. That is the prescribed method of Vedic civilization known as varnashram dharma. When one takes sannyas after enjoying family life, he pleases the Supreme Lord, Vishnu. One has to understand one's position in family or worldly life. That is called intelligence. One should not remain always trapped in family life to satisfy his tongue and genitals in association with their wife. In such a way, one simply spoils his life. According to Vedic civilization, it is imperative to give up the family at a certain stage, by force, if necessary. Unfortunately, so-called followers of Vedic life do not give up their family even at the end of life, unless they are forced by death. There should be a thorough overhauling of the social system, and society should revert to the Vedic principles, that is, the 4 varnas and 4 ashrams. Om Jnanatamandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshram Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Bukram Kurtavachalang Pungang Hayate Gurim Yat Kripa Taraham Bande Shigurum Dinataranam Vanchakapa Tibhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In the first sentence of this purport, Prabhupada says materialistic life means forgetting one's constitutional position as the eternal servant of Krishna. Nityasera Krishna Prema The constitutional position of the living entity is to be the eternal servant of Krishna. And this service attitude towards Krishna, it's aroused by what we're doing here. Hearing and chanting the glories of Krishna and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And by this continual hearing and chanting, we become Krishnaized. And it's like Prabhupada used to give this example that if you take a rod and you put it in fire, eventually the rod, it becomes like fire. Yeah? Whatever it touches, it burns. So the more we're in contact with Krishna, we become Krishnaized. Yeah. And Lord Chaitanya was once asked by a devotee, what does it mean to be a devotee? He said, it means to associate with devotees. Because by association with devotees, that association rubs off onto us. And we develop the qualities of a devotee. Satam prasangham mama virya sangvado bhavanti vitkarna sayanakata. Tajosana atsvavavartmani shradharatir bhakti anukramishati. That devotees, in the association of the other devotees, derive great happiness in hearing the mama virya, the wonderful pastimes of Krishna. Yeah. Pastimes of Krishna is so wonderful. The philosophy of Krishna is so wonderful. Everything about Krishna is so wonderful. So to hear about Krishna in the association of devotees is very wonderful. Yeah. And by this association, we gain great faith in Krishna. Shraddha. To gain faith in Krishna, it's not an easy thing. Previously, we had so much faith in Maya, in sense gratification. We were just going for it. Isn't it? Not all of us. Ram never had that experience. But everybody else, we all needed sense gratification. That was like that's like the religion of the age. Just somehow satisfy the senses, because we're thinking we are these senses. So now this faith in material sense gratification is being shook up. And we're trying to gain great faith in Krishna. And actually this movement expanded so much all over the world because Prabhupada had 100% complete faith in Krishna. Yeah. And his spiritual master. He had so much faith. There was one time he was there was some interview and the interviewer said, are you sure what you're teaching is correct? And Prabhupada was just he was kind of appalled about the question. I'm traveling around the world, convincing people all over the world to serve Krishna, and you're asking me, am I sure I'm correct? He just thought it was kind of a ridiculous question. It was. So, yes, Prabhupada had complete faith in Krishna and his spiritual master, in the Shastras. And therefore, so many devotees came and took shelter of Krishna and Srila Prabhupada because of his strong faith. And we could also attain this strong faith in Krishna to the point where we can't be shook up. This is the third class devotee. He can be shook up. He can be swayed and go back into sense gratification again. The first class devotee, he can't. In the second class even, he also has great faith. But he doesn't have the first class devotee. He's so strong, he can convince others by his preaching. The second class devotee he has great faith in Krishna, but not so much that he can convince others. Yeah. So, this faith is something we should pray for, and it will come as we continue on. Shraddha Ratir. Then we get this taste for Krishna. We want to hear. We're enthusiastic to hear about Krishna. We're enthusiastic to chant the names of Krishna. This enthusiasm it's so important. Utsaha, enthusiasm. The first one, utsaha nishchayadharya. Enthusiasm, confidence, patience. These are so important for our advancement. And if we associate with devotees that are enthusiastic, we become enthusiastic. Shraddha Ratir Bhakti, and then we attain love. Bhakti, we attain love for Krishna. This is the goal. To give up all of our material desires and just have this one desire to serve Krishna. I was just listening to a class this morning. Prabhupada was saying that if we even have one little pinch, if we have a pinch of desire, material desire, then we can't go back to Krishna. We got to give up all these material desires. One desire. It's a big test for us. So many material attachments. But Krishna is very attractive. This is our hope. That Krishna is so attractive that we'll become completely attracted to Krishna. and lose all of our attraction for this material world. Yeah. And the main attraction in this world is what? Yes, Prabhupada's speaking about this, Narada Muni is speaking about this here. The attraction to the opposite sex. This is the main feature, the main attraction in the material world. A man is attracted to a woman is attracted to a man. And they get married and become very attached. This is my wife. This is my husband. But that wife has had so many husbands. And she has had so many husbands. She has had so many husbands, and he has had so many wives in the past. And they have children, and they're both very attached to their children. But the child has had so many fathers and mothers. Yeah. One friend of mine, he was speaking to a group of devotees. I was there, and he just he said that brahmacharis can't understand what it's like to have a child. He says become very attached. Yeah. Come from your body, so attached. Yeah. And we were in his house one time, and his child was very young, maybe 6 months old, and he was crying, just crying like anything. And I thought of a good way to stop him from crying. So I took him and I threw him up. And he immediately he stopped crying. But my friend was in total anxiety that I'm going to drop the child. he was scared to death. Don't drop the child. I mean, I grew up with 6 brothers and sisters, so I used to throw them all over the place. Yes. I had some experience. Yeah. But he was big anxiety. And he told me that the reason he married his wife, she made good spaghetti. As like Prabhupada says here in the purport. They get married, nice prasadam, and sex. Yeah. These are the attractive features in household life. But as it's said here, it gets old after a while. The man, his beauty is eventually dissipates, and the woman's beauty also. I asked one householder, he's been married for 40 years, senior man in our society. So I said, you've been married for 40 years, so what's it like after 40 years? And he said, well, imagine living with the same brahmachari for 40 years. Okay. Because generally, after a while, even you're staying with a brahmachari in the same ashram, after a while, let me get some other association. So that's what his reply was. It gets old after a while. So, yeah. But Krishna never gets old. He's ever fresh. He's always increasing in his beauty and his character and everything. Everything about Krishna is always wonderful and always increasing. So this is the nature of Krishna. In the material world, this is the main attraction. And there's one amazing incident in the Srimad Bhagavatam of a king who had many wives. Many, many wives. But they were all barren. And the king, he's got to have a heir to the kingdom. He had no son. So he's big anxiety, so many wives. No son. So one sage, Angira Rishi, went to visit him. And he could see he was in big anxiety. And the king explained the problem. So Angira could have just gone right out and preached to him. But he could see that he's in such anxiety about this that he decided to bless him to have a son. But he said, but your son's name is going to be Harsa Shoka, happiness and distress. But the king didn't mind. He thought, all right, he's going to be disobedient, or but that's all right. I'll have a son. So he was thinking that was going to be the Harsha. He won't be obedient. So his wife, I think Devotee was his wife, had a child, and he was in ecstasy. She was in ecstasy that they finally had a child. And everybody in the kingdom was so happy that the king has had a child, a prince. But there were some that were not very pleased, because his attention was going to Devotee, not to the other queens. And they became so disturbed. It's amazing. They became so disturbed that they poisoned the son. They poisoned the prince. Real love. So the queen told the maidservant, bring my child, I want to see my child. So she went to the bedroom, and he was lifeless. And she called out, she cried out in anxiety and distress. And the queen was like, what was she crying about? What was she screaming about? And she went in and saw the child is dead. And then the king found out. He was some distance away. And he was so distraught, he was so disturbed, that his legs were buckling under. He could barely even walk. He was so upset because of this attachment. So you become attached to these material things, then guaranteed there's going to be distress. So he was so disturbed. So he went to the room where his son was lying dead, and everybody was crying in anxiety. Some of the queens were even there, feigning distress. Oh, it's terrible. So then Narada Muni with Angira Rishi show up and see how distraught everyone is. So Narada Muni, by his mystic ability, he was able to bring the child back to life. Amazing. So I'm going to read to you what the living entity in this child's body said when he came back to life. So Sri Narada Muni said, O living entity. Oops. Sorry. Oh, there. Maybe that would be good. That's 16, or that's chapter 16, Canto 6, text number 2. Sri Narada Muni said, O living entity, all good fortune unto you. Just see your father and mother, all your friends and relatives are overwhelmed with grief because of your passing away. Because you died untimely, the balance of your lifetime still remains. Therefore, you may re-enter your body and enjoy the remainder of your life, surrounded by your friends and relatives. Accept the royal throne and all the opulences given by your father. By the mystic power of Narada Muni, the living entity re-entered his dead body for a short time and spoke in reply to Narada Muni's request. He said, This is amazing. This is amazing. I mean, now not only does he re-enter his body, but now he speaks such deep philosophy. It's like amazing. According to the results of my fruitive activities, I, the living being, transmigrate from one body to another, sometimes going to the species of demigods, sometimes to the species of lower animals, sometimes among the vegetables, and sometimes to the human species. Therefore, in which birth were these my mother and father? And, they're standing right there, seeing this. The child, remember, they're completely distraught. Now their son has come back to life, and he's speaking this amazing philosophy, asking, well, which mother and father, which ones are these? And remember, there's queens around, the maid is there, and there's probably a lot of people around listening to this. So it's quite a scene. No one is actually my mother and father. How can I accept these two people as my parents? In this mature world, which advances like a river that carries away the living entity, all people become friends, relatives, and enemies in due course of time. They also act neutrally. They mediate. They despise one another, and they act in many other relationships. Nonetheless, despite these various transactions, no one is permanently related. Text 6. Just as gold and other commodities are continually transferred from one place to another in due course of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of his fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe, being injected into various bodies in different species of life by one kind of father after another. Text 7. A few living entities are born in the human species, and others are born as animals. Although both are living entities, their relationships are impermanent. An animal may remain in the custody of a human being for some time, and then the same animal may be transferred to the possession of other human beings. As soon as the animal goes away, the former proprietor no longer has a sense of proprietorship or ownership. As long as the animal is in his possession, he certainly has an affinity for it, but as soon as the animal is sold, the affinity is lost. Even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of a relationship based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal. Actually, it is the body that is born or lost, not the living entity. One should not accept that the living entity takes birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called fathers and mothers. This must be such a shock, the mother and father just listening to this thing. As long as he appears as a son of a certain father and mother as a result of his past fruitive activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus he falsely accepts himself as the son or acts affectionately, as their son, and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, one should not be falsely involved with jubilation and lamentation. The living entity is eternal and imperishable because he actually has no beginning and no end. He never takes birth or dies. He is the basic principle of all types of bodies, yet he does not belong to the bodily category. The living being is so sublime that he is equal in quality to the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, because he is extremely small, he is prone to be illusioned by the external energy, and thus he creates various bodies for himself according to his different desires. Text 10. For this living entity, no one is dear, no one is anyone unfavorable, nor is anyone unfavorable. He makes no distinction between that which is his own and that which belongs to anyone else. He is one without a second. In other words, he is not affected by friends and enemies, well-wishers or mischief mongers. He is only an observer, a witness of the different qualities of men. Text 11. The Supreme Lord, Atma, the creator of cause and effect, does not accept the happiness and distress that result from fruitive actions. He is completely independent of having to accept a material body, and because he has no material body, he is always neutral. The living entities, being part and parcel of the Lord, possess his qualities in a minute quantity. Therefore, one should not be affected by lamentation. Text 12. Sukadeva Goswami continued, when the conditioned soul, Jiva, in the form of Maharaj Chittaketu's son, had spoken in this way, and then left, Chittaketu and the other relatives of the dead son were all astonished. Thus, they cut off the shackles of their affection, which is due to their relationship with him, and gave up their lamentation. So then I guess he went down, he left his body again, right? Yeah. Now, in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, I think it was Srivas Thakur, during a kirtan, his son, the son of Srivas Thakur, left his body, and all the ladies were just like, just crying, just wailing in anxiety, crying, oh, our son is... And he told them, don't disturb Lord Chaitanya's dancing. He was so detached, so much attached to Lord Chaitanya. He said, just stay, just don't disturb. So then eventually Lord Chaitanya said, I can understand there was some calamity here. And then I think Srivas Thakur even kind of still tried no, it's okay, let's continue the kirtan. I think it was still like that. But then Lord Chaitanya said, no, what happened? Well, my son, he passed away. And then was the Lord Chaitanya, he brought him back to life. But he stayed alive, right? I think he didn't go back to... He did. Did he speak also? He spoke also. And then he also left, huh? Okay. So that's there. Yeah, again, that pacified the relatives. Yeah. So, yeah. Quite amazing. This is the amazing pastimes of Krishna and his devotees. But this shows how the living entity is completely different from the body. As Prabhupada many times he said, this body, it's dead. It's dead. It appears to be alive because we're in it, because we, the minute living entity, the soul, is within it. But as soon as, if I were to leave right now, this body would just go limp. It would just lay down and finish. Yeah. Then it'd be very clear, Vijaya is definitely not his body. And as Prabhupada, he said, when he was, just before he was leaving his body, he said that I've given up, what was it? Yeah, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Because he stopped eating. He practically he was sleeping a little bit. But, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
I'm sorry, I misdirected you. He said, I've given up mating and defending.
Okay.
No question of mating, but given up defending. And now I've given up eating and sleeping.
Yes, yeah,
so I guess I'm liberated.
Yes, yeah, that was it, thank you. Yes. So, yeah, the living entity is meant to serve Krishna, not to be absorbed in this body and eating and sleeping, mating and defending. So this is the, actually in this verse, at the end of this verse, it said that he does not, is that it? Oh, the verse. Or he forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death who is trying to kill him from behind. So the living entity is surrounded. He's got time in front of him, taking away his days and nights, and then the superintendent of death is behind. Yamaraj is behind. Also, so surrounded. Just like that amazing example given in the Mahabharata of a covered well. One man, he's walking, and he falls into the well. And there's a root in the well. And he grabs on to this root, and he's thinking, "Whew, good thing this root is here." And then he looks down, and there's a black snake. And he's like, "Whew, good thing this root is here." So he's hanging there trying to figure out how to get out of this predicament. So then he hears some chewing, and there's a black rat chewing on the root. And he's thinking, this has got to be a dream. This can't be real. And then after some time he hears some more chewing, and there's a white rat chewing on the other side. And he's thinking, this has got to be a dream. How is this possible? Still he's thinking how to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I'll be finished. And then he hears some roaring. Yeah, and there's a tiger. So even though I get out of here, I'm finished. This is unbelievable. What to do? So then, as he's hanging there, trying to figure out how he feels a drop. Every few seconds he feels a drop. It's like, what's that? Honey. Honey. So he puts his tongue out. Get some honey. Life isn't so bad after all. So the black snake is compared to death. And the black and the white, rather, compared to night and day, taking away our life. And the tiger is compared to Durga. She carries this trident that has the three modes, or these different the miseries coming from material nature, our own mind and body, and other living entities, nature, and our own mind and body. And most of this suffering actually is coming from our own mind and body. Just like so many people, they commit suicide every year. I think in America something like 40,000 people a year. But what to speak of the world? I mean, why? Mind. The mind. Anybody know what living entity kills more living entities? That kills the most living entities? Huh? Mosquitoes, yeah. Mosquitoes. And next, human beings. Yeah, human beings. I was talking to one forest ranger. He was a ranger in the Amazon jungle. Imagine that. Whoa. The thickest jungle in the world, graduate. So I said, well, what's the most dangerous animal in the Amazon jungle? Human beings. Human beings. The worst. So yeah. So this is the material world. And the honey, the little drops of honey, the little bit of sense gratification the living entity gets in this world. Just a little bit. Not much. The living entity, what is it? The living entity, we want an ocean of happiness that's ever increasing. But here we get little drops here and there. And it's temporary. It's not a nice place. Someone wants to be happy, this is not the place to be happy. Even someone lives a nice life. He's got wealth, family, friends. he dies. The end result, he died. He doesn't want to die. Just like Steve Jobs, had so much wealth, so many friends, so much facility for material enjoyment. He had to leave. Forced out. He wasn't that old. In his 60s, I think. Or 50s or something like that. Wasn't that old. So yeah, material world, it's not the place to be if you want to be happy. If you want to be happy, better go to the spiritual world. On that note, we have a question or comment? Javita Prabhu.
Point out there was a similar analogy given in the previous verse.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough to have this verse. It was, if I just read it, let's take a look at it.
Yeah.
My dear king, please search out that deer who is engaged in eating grass in a very nice flower garden along with his wife. That deer is very much attached to his business, and he's enjoying the sweet singing of the bumblebees in his garden. Just try to understand his position. He is unaware that before him is a tiger, which is accustomed to living at the cost of another's flesh, and behind the deer is a hunter, who is threatening to pierce him with sharp arrows. Thus the deer's death is imminent. So a similar analogy, the tiger is death and the hunter is time, I think, like that. But just one note on that nice reading of the Jivas, Jiva Uvacha. I was looking at, because I was following along, I was looking at the verses, and the verses, Prabhupada's giving these long, he was putting in so much extra there from the commentaries, his own realization,
realizations,
to enhance that analogy. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
How much he's given from there.
Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you. That was a wonderful class.
Thank you.
Glad you've safely come back. When you were referring to Srivas Thakur,
Put the mic
when you
on.
were
There
referring to Srivas Thakur's son having passed away during the kirtan, when it was over and Lord Chaitanya said, "I didn't feel the bliss. I understand there's something gone wrong, some calamity." And finally, when Srivas Thakur did tell him what it was, he became upset. "Why didn't you tell me? This is horrible." And then he went to the son, and the reason why I'm bringing it up, because the Madhyam, he is supposed to have solid friendships with the devotees. And the preface of that, the foundation of that, is one's love or relationship with Krishna. All the devotees, all living entities, certain family members, etc., they're all servants and maidservants of Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya showed affection for him. "Why didn't you tell me?" And then he went to him and he kind of chastised the son. Where have you gone? What's going on here? And then the Jiva, the son, spoke transcendental knowledge. There's another pastime of Advaita Acharya in Puri when Kirtan was going on, and his son also left. And nobody could revive him, and Advaita Acharya is very wrought with distress. And so none of the devotees, these are associates of Lord Chaitanya chanting, trying to revive him and whatever. So Lord Chaitanya went over and touched him and, come back, said, "What's going on?" And so in that particular instance, the living entity, his son, I believe it was Gopal. Don't take that to the bank, but I think it was one of the three good sons.
But he continued living, right?
He continued living.
I knew there was one, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm just making mention because you talked about living with a brahmachari for 40 years. So I've never lived with anybody other than Chatura for not that long, but getting there. And if the friendship based on service isn't there, then of course it'd be like I want to move out of the room and get another brahmachari associate. But you didn't emphasize it because it's not your dharma. But a big part of this was about vanaprastha ashram, and we don't really hear enough of that. That was the opinion of Janananda Das Brahmachari and Janananda Das Goswami, that, at a certain age, you have to take up the duties of vanaprastha. And it may be separation or it may be continuing, but the emphasis has to be in service, hearing, chanting, austerities, etc. You should be lending your experience to the society. You have service to render, being older. And it's funny when you said, he wasn't that old, he was in his 60s, so the older we get, the more we push the boundary of what's old, because we don't feel old inside. It's the body that... but anyway, those were a couple of thoughts.
Yes, if the husband and wife have a good service attitude towards Krishna, then I guess they could have a nice relationship together. Now, this couple that I was talking about, they don't. I mean, there is some service, but they're kind of struggling. Yeah. So therefore, the service, the nice and intense service attitude towards Krishna may not be there. But if that actually, I think Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that in Kali Yuga, sannyas, if is not practical. If you're serving Krishna nicely together, then vanapras. That's also vanapras, where you're living together, but you're just serving Krishna, right? So, if you have that nice service attitude towards Krishna, you could live nicely together. Yeah.
Our movement isn't going to award sannyasa ashram to that many devotees, because if you're not a dedicated preacher, you don't really need that. That's our philosophy, I mean, if somebody takes it from somebody outside the movement, or one of my godbrothers took it from a picture of Srila Prabhupada, and he passed away shortly thereafter, wasn't that long. But, that kind of thing is looked at like, well, that's bogus, that kind of thing. So it really is. We're shooting for pure bhakti. That you mentioned it, not a tinge of desire. Man, if you don't have full faith in Guru and Krishna and don't get their mercy, then what hope do we have?
Yeah. Well, we have wonderful examples in our society. Burijan Prabhu, Vaisesika Prabhu, householders, for a long time, in their 30, 40 years, and they're just doing incredible service. I mean, there's more. What else? I thought of those two, but there's yourself, yourself. You're preaching, nice preaching, householder, So many devotees in our society, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki